darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing Tess of the Road by Rachel Hartman. This is a young adult fantasy novel that is kind of a road trip story. It follows Tess, and she tries to run away from all her problems by setting off on this journey along this road that takes her throughout her country of Goredd into the southern country of Nins below her. And along the way, she discovers more world views and kind of tries to reconcile what she is and what she believes in rather than what she's been constantly told as a child. So it's kind of a quest adventure story, but it's really more about finding yourself and kind of a coming of age story. And it definitely doesn't feel like typical fantasy adventure stories. So if that's what you're looking for, this might not be the best book for you. On the other hand, it is lots of fun and I enjoyed it. It definitely has strong feminist overtones and really grapples with religion and sex and viewpoints on just who we are as humans and our roles in society and what we are capable of and what we can do. So this book is set within the same world as Seraphina and Shadowscale, which Rachel Hartman also wrote. And in fact, Tess is Seraphina's half-sister. So we do see a lot of the characters from these two books reappear, and some plot points from these two books, especially Shadowscale, because this follows that, are spoiled. So if you're planning on reading all of them, I would start with Seraphina. Also, this book doesn't do as much world building, so if you really want the world building, start with Seraphina. But you could start with this as a separate kind of adventure, like it's considered a separate series from Seraphina, even though it exists within the same world and follows the same timeline, which is a little bit confusing. I read all three of these in publication order and the chronological order, so I didn't have a ton of trouble remembering. So I kind of knew who all these people were. It's also been a while since I've read these, especially since I read Shadowscale and was disappointed, so I didn't really want to reread them before going into this because I thought I would just not want to read this book then. So it took me a while to kind of remember everything, but stuff is pretty well explained. So this book does have a cast of characters and glossary in the back if you get lost or confused, which I did a few times, but I also didn't know it was back here because it's in the back. It is a bit spoilery, which is probably why it's in the back of the book, but if you do need it, it's there. The other thing you should know is that this world has fire-breathing dragons, but there are these creatures called SARs that can take human form. And so Tess never encounters the fire-breathing dragons as fire-breathing dragons. A couple of them appear, but they're in their human-esque form. But mostly we're dealing with these small lizard-like creatures called quigdals, which can't really fly. They've lost their ability, but they've developed hands on all four legs, and they're really good at building stuff, which I still thought was fascinating. And Tess also goes in search of this world serpent, which is technically considered a dragon, but is more of just a giant serpent, snake. So if you're looking for fire-breathing dragons, they're also not really appearing in this book. You should probably read Seraphina and Shadowscale instead. So on to Tess of the Road, now that I've set everything up, hopefully. This one is very character-driven, so I'm going to talk about the plot last after I set up the characters, and the main one we follow is Tess. She is adventuresome and curious and clever, but she's constantly getting in trouble. She can't seem to help herself. She's impulsive is what she is. She'll be curious about something and then just do it regardless. So, the prologue to this book is her at 6 years old, and she wants to know where babies come from, and she knows that her aunt just got married and that they talked about, issuing, talked about kind of the being fruitful thing in their marriage, and she's like, marriage is a part of this equation. So she marries her cousin to her sister and then tries to get them to go up into the bedroom and have babies, and her mom sees this and totally freaks out. Tess gets into tons of troubles and gets one really big ass whooping. Tess grows up not really knowing a whole lot about sex and what it's supposed to be about, and there's a lot of talk about sex in this book, even though it doesn't necessarily use the word sex because it's a medieval world. But basically she wants to know about sex and she wants to know about babies. And we find out that by the time she's 14, she's gotten herself pregnant, and she does have a baby out of wedlock. which is not great. That completely ruins her, and her mom just beats it into her head that she's never gonna amount to anything. Nobody's gonna want to marry her. Her options are very limited now. So Tess spends about 2 years of her life trying to do penance. That's what she considers it as penance, where she's at court with her younger sister Janine, who now gets to be married first. And really, Tess just spends the whole time trying to get Tess married well so that Tess can kind of redeem the family. And she's not going to be able to do it herself. And she just hates it. She hates being at court. She hates having to serve. And she hates having to give her sister all the credit. But also, this is her twin sister, and she loves her. And they've had all these adventures. And Tessa's just really envious of her sister. Her sister's the smart one, the pretty one, the perfect child, the one that their mother wants. And Tess just never feels accepted or wanted. So Tess has tons of self-esteem issues at the beginning of this book. She also has to deal with comparisons to her older half-sister, Serafina. And Serafina is the smart one. She's very logical. She's very studious. She loves her music, and she devotes her stuff to that. I mean, Serafina secured her place very solidly at court. She's up there with the queen and the prince consort, and like the three of them doing their own thing. And she's actually considered a saint within the society because of her half-dragon status. And so Serafina can't do any wrong either. And so Tess is constantly comparing herself to her two sisters and feeling like she doesn't measure up. She also has two younger brothers who are kind of honestly interchangeable within the plot of the story. I really didn't see a difference between the two of them. And they're both kind of bullies and little brattish. I mean, they're like 10, so that's maybe not unexpected. They're given a lot more liberties and allowed to go off and do more mischievous things than Tess was ever allowed to do by virtue of the fact that they are boys. Then we also have Tessa's mother, Anne Marie, who is very virtuous and very worried about doing everything properly and about sin, and she really beats it into her children's heads, especially the girls, that they need to be proper and that it's really their fault if they get into any trouble because they must have tempted a guy. Which is also a little confusing to Tess because she's never told exactly what this temptation is, like how far is too far. She's just told not to lose her virtue. And so Tess starts dating and she hangs out with this guy, Will, and they're having fun, and Tess just kind of lets it slide step by step and doesn't really... She's in too deep before she realizes how deep she is, and part of that is because Anne-Marie never tells her the full facts of life, the whole birds and the bees spiel. So it comes as a surprise to her. Also, her mother is very emotionally abusive and also a little bit physically abusive. Most of Tessa's punishments are getting spanked, but when you get spanked 203 times in a row, that's excessive. So, yeah, the mother's kind of a monster. Kind of don't like her. She also can't forgive her husband Claude for ever having married a dragon, Serafina's mom. And she's like, you must have known she was a dragon. You can't tell me that you didn't know. And then Tessa's father, Claude, is kind of oblivious to everything that's happening in a way. He's the lawyer and he's very studious, and he, in a way, gets Serafina better because she's also studious. But even then, he kind of doesn't notice what's happening with his family, and he loses his status as a lawyer because of his first marriage when it comes out that he married a dragon. And so his family goes into ruin, and he's more worried about his books than trying to help them. And so the pressure is really on Janine and Tess to try to redeem the family. We also meet their cousin Kenneth, who is really awesome. He is a few years older than the twins, so he's called their cousin even though he's technically Anne-Marie's younger brother. But he is also curious, and he and Tess kind of get each other and have this worldview where they're out to explore things, which I love. He's kind of this positive influence in her life to go explore everything and question, and kind of has this ability to know when he's about to get, when he's pushing things too far and not to cross that line, and isn't as impulsive as Tess, so kind of the better version of Tess. Also, he's a guy, so he has more liberties than she does. Tess is under a lot of pressure, particularly from her family and her situation. And And she mostly copes with all of this pressure by drinking. Even when she's at court trying to do penance, she's got like her bottle stashed away. And that's how she copes, which is not a very healthy coping style. The story really picks up once we get to Janine's wedding. So Janine gets married. She marries this lord, and they actually really like each other. It's basically a love match, even though Janine won't admit that she's in love with him. And they're really well suited to each other, and it's kind of the perfect marriage, and their mother's happy, and Tess feels like maybe she's actually redeemed herself. But then she goes to the house, the family estate, um, and she starts hearing Janine talk about how she should be the governess to their children when they come, and that's how, since she can't get married on her own, like maybe this would be an alternative. You can be a servant. And Tessa's like, I don't really want to do that. So she starts getting drunk, and she makes a huge scene at the wedding, which culminates in her punching a priest. Not just any priest, but the groom's brother. And it's really not good. Her mom is like, we're done. We're done. You're getting sent off to a nunnery. And Tessa's like, yeah, I really don't want to do that. So she runs away from her family, just bolts in the middle of the night and leaves, and starts off on this voyage along the road, in which she encounters lots of interesting, crazy adventures. They're a little bit episodic, so she'll like travel this one area, and in this one town, one adventure happens, and then she travels to another town or another farm or something, and another adventure happens. So kind of neat little stories, little pockets, but I thought they were fun. Tess does meet this one friend of hers, Pathka, who was one of the little dragon Quigdals, and Pathka is currently a male, but when Tess first met him, Ko was a female. The Quigdals use the pronoun Ko because they can switch genders frequently, so they just use Ko instead of using him and she. But the first time Tess meets Pathka, Ko's laying an egg and having lots of trouble with it, and so Tess helps with the delivery. If it's an egg, do we still call it a delivery? The laying, I guess. And convinces Pathka not to kill the child that was in that egg called Kiku. And they kind of just become friends at this point. And it's really cool to see them, because we get flashbacks into Tessa's past when she's a child and when she's a teenager. So we do get a flashback to when they first met, and Pathka gets her, and Tess is obsessed with all these pirate stories, and so Tess trades all these pirate stories that she grew up on about this pirate called Dozarius, and in trade, Pathka tells her all these dragon legends about these world serpents. And when Tess meets Ko later, the dragon has these dreams about the world serpent calling to Ko. And so the two of them set off trying to find the world serpent. And they have these adventures where the dragon kind of just has to go hide. So some of these adventures are the two of them together. Some of them are adventures that they have separately, mostly following Tess. But sometimes Pathka tells us what he's been up to when they're apart. And then there's also Pathka's one child, Kiku, the one that Tess stopped Pathka from killing. And that's a complicated relationship. And Kiku kind of blames Tess for the fact that she even exists. She doesn't want to be here. Pathka hasn't been a great parent. Their relationship is strained. Things aren't working the way it's supposed to within a Quigdal relationship. So that's complicated and also kind of interesting. So parenting is also something that appears multiple times throughout this book. Both the process of having babies, but also raising them. And Tess kind of really misses this child that she had to give up and ended up losing. Like, she really kind of wanted that baby, and that wasn't an option for her. She couldn't keep it. So she also has regrets for the baby, and we see Tess watching these two and trying to rationalize it herself and find out what her views actually are on parenting. So the society Tess is growing up in is this medieval world. It's very patriarchal, and especially the town and the court that she lived in, it's men first. And women are really there just to birth children and for the pleasure of men. Like, she's even told that it's her duty when she gets married just to have sex, and it's supposed to be for the man's pleasure and not for hers, just so that she can get pregnant and have babies. So, not great. But it's also not safe for her to be traveling because they have the society where men can just take what they want, basically. And so she dons the disguise of a boy. And most of the time, she goes around telling everybody that her name is Yakumo, which is the name of the priest that she punched, which I kind of think is hilarious and funny. Like, she can't think of a new name, so she just picks that one. She also picks up on her cousin's childhood nickname for her, Tessapuka, which apparently means stupid head. So, good job, Tess. You should probably check out what the translation is before you adopt a name, maybe. But it's interesting to watch her experience everything from this other perspective. So everyone thinks she's a boy. And I mean, she gets flack for not having a beard and being so young. And she must be inexperienced. Well, he must be inexperienced. But at the same time, she's still treated way better as a man. And we get to see her experiencing it and rationalizing it and comparing the two. Tess definitely is smart and clever and is thinking about the world around her, which I super loved. There are tons of crazy adventures that happen. She runs into some thieves. She ends up joining a road crew for a while and bunking with these guys. We see her reach this main city at the end of the road. She has an interest in learning, and so we see flashbacks to when she was 13 and 14 and she met the guy that got her pregnant and why she kind of fell for him. And we get to see the university and everything there, and they're crazy running around hijinks because she's got to keep the fact that she's got this boyfriend a secret. So I thought there's still funny, crazy adventures happening in this, which are exciting, but kind of the main focus on this is Tessa's past and how she's rationalizing and growing. And we do get these slowly revealing flashbacks. So something will happen while she's on the road and it'll remind her of something else. And so we're slowly starting to piece together what happened with Will and how she got pregnant and why she doesn't have the baby anymore. And it's not terribly shocking or surprising, but it does take a while to reveal that, which kind of got annoying sometimes because we get this little tiny snippet, but then it just kind of stops and you're like, no, I want to know what happened after that point. Why did we stop? I also really liked her journey into the southern country of Ninnis, which is way more liberal. Like, women are more open about having sex and enjoying having sex, which is really awesome. Women are given some more freedoms. I mean, it's still mostly a male-dominated society, but women are allowed to do things like own businesses and stuff. And we get to see some of these women who have made their own way and haven't just gone and gotten married, which is awesome. And we get to see her view on that. She runs into a couple of different types of women. So she runs into nuns on the way. She runs into this traveling prostitute and getting to talk to all these people. Going into this book, I was kind of apprehensive about it because the road trip part of Shadow Scale, where Seraphina has to go and like find everyone, was not my favorite part of that book. I really didn't like it. It's why I only gave that book 3 stars. So I wasn't sure I was going to like this, but the tone of it is completely different because Seraphina and Tess have completely different worldviews. Seraphina spent her entire traveling thinking about being home and wanting to be home and not really enjoying it. And so as a reader, I didn't really enjoy it either. Whereas Tess is all about the road. It's exciting. It's fantastic. She feels a part of it. She feels alive when she's on the road. She feels connected and interesting. And so it is so much more fun and interesting to read Tess traveling. I love it. I really loved all the feminist overtones. They're kind of a constant thing, though, and sometimes it was a bit much. But for the most part, I really loved it. Sex, pregnancy, motherhood, marriage, and periods are talked about constantly. So if any of those, like, really not your thing, and this may not be your best book, and I really like seeing these 2 different societies and all these different people in them and all these different worldviews, and we see Tess sorting through them. It's not necessarily that one worldview is better than another, although her mother's is a bit extreme, honestly. But it doesn't really pass judgment. It's about Tess finding out what's right for her, and that the worldviews these other characters have are the right worldviews for them, for the most part. I mean, her mom's kind of miserable, so that's a different case. It did take me a while to get into this book and kind of get into the feel of Tess and her adventure, and the flashbacks happening was also a little bit off-putting, but mostly I loved it, and I really love Tess, and I really want another book. Really need more, guys. Especially where this book ends. I'm like, can I have what's next, please? I want to know. And on the whole, I gave this book 4.5 stars. I kind of am like teetering back and forth between the 4-star and the 5-star. I think I ended up giving it 5 stars on Goodreads. So it's amazing. There is trigger warnings, but there's also trigger warnings that are spoilery. So if you don't want to know what they are, peace out. I love you and keep reading. The spoilers. This book deals with rape, and really graphically and really analyzing it. So it's a big part of this book. So if that's something you're really sensitive to, this might not be a great book for you. Also, she really does take a lot of emotional abuse and physical abuse from her mother, but also from other characters as she's traveling on the road. Like, it's not safe. So if you have read Tess of the Road, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. And if you've read any of Rachel Hartman's other books, Seraphina, Shadow Scale, or Amy Unbounded, which are all amazing, also let me know, and I will post the links to the other books that she wrote down in the description below that I've read. Peace out. I love you guys. I keep reading. Bye.